Hello, welcome back to Cindy's Library today. And today I am going to talk about, I've already talked about my best reads from last year, but today I am going to talk about, some of my stats that I read, my reading challenges, things like that. So, I guess we should get started. Let's see, I guess we'll start with statistics. Now, I did all of this by hand since I keep track of it by hand, so the numbers could be off slightly. But bearing that in mind, let's see, I have 3 for the lowest categories. I read 4 each, poetry and plays. I did 4 each for those, which I'm actually rather impressed with. I'm not sure I usually do that much. And then historical. I'm afraid it's true. I'm not much of a historical reader. I'm very picky about my historical fiction. Usually I end up wanting to read actual histories and biographies. There are a few exceptions, but not so many. Let's see here. And then I have another tie for second lowest, 8 items each for the Inklings and for religious works or related. Oh, and if you'll pardon me for a sec. Sorry about that. So anyway, religious books in some way or another, and Inklings. Now, Inklings at least is a little deflated, since one of the plays was by an Inkling and I read some nonfiction about the Inklings. I'd still like to get both of those up a bit higher next year, I think. Next, fantasy, only 15. It's not too long ago that would have been much higher. But as you'll see, I've been distracted by other things, and to be fair, some of these other things could be counted as fantasy, but I primarily counted them as other. Let's see. Next, I have mysteries and women's fiction, 16 each. Now, for women's fiction, I counted things like D.E. Stevenson, Miss Reed, Elizabeth Goudge, anything along those lines. And then 16 mysteries, most but not all Agatha Christie. So, pretty good year for mysteries, I would say. Next, 23 nonfiction. I'd say that's pretty high. I read 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 Inkling biographies of one sort or another this year. And then I read a lot of nonfiction for Nonfiction November, but maybe I read more nonfiction than I thought. That would not be a bad thing if that is true. 26 short stories, which is rather inflated since one is an entire collection I read at the beginning of the year, That Moment of Tenderness by Madeleine L'Engle. A lot of them are single ones from various Christmas anthologies that I read in December. So I'm not sure that's entirely accurate. I'm not entirely sure how else to count them though. So we've got that. Let's see, 34 for manga, light novels, and graphic novels. Yeah, I read a fair amount of those last year. Part of it is the fault of A Man and His Cat. I discovered that, I think, at the end of last year and fell in love. So, yes. And then 35 middle grade, a bit higher than I thought. And of course, a lot of these could be counted as fantasy as well. I've read a lot of middle grade classics too, though, and of course, there's middle grade March. And I guess we should not be surprised the way my reading has gone lately. Classics, I count 39 items. Now, some of them are on the shorter side, like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde I read, and that's relatively short for a classic. And I also count Shakespeare. I put that in classics, not plays. Maybe I should have switched that. I may have to rethink some of this counting for next year. But in any case, lots of classic reading this year. I participated in Shaktember, and I finished whatever I had not finished from Shaktember last year. I also read everything we were going to see at the Utah Shakespeare Festival. That was Shakespeare related, and we saw a lot of Shakespeare, relatively speaking. And lo, it was wonderful. So that inflated it as well. And Victober. Did I go a little overboard this year? Possibly overall. Now, this could be off by a few points just because I hand counted it, but 235. I think I need to find a hobby and not just read this year. I think that's going to be another goal. I love reading, and there's nothing better when you're tired than to sit down and read instead of doing television or doom scrolling all of the time. But yeah, I need a hobby, something mindless. Have any ideas? Let's suggest them in the comments. I have a bit of a creative, artistic streak. I mean, I know how to crochet and knit and things like that. So, yeah. Have any suggestions for a relaxing hobby that's not reading? Feel free to suggest one because I could use a few ideas. Needless to say, it was a good reading year. Read lots of wonderful things, clearly, and a few things that perhaps were not quite so wonderful, but that's okay. Oh, one other note. Historical would be higher if I counted middle grade historical, but I put all of those in middle grade. Seem to like historical overall better when it is in middle grade. Just me. Have any suggestions for middle grade historical? Love to hear about that as well. Hope your reading year was just as good. Thank you so much for stopping by. I truly do appreciate it. So until next time, I hope we all stay safe and healthy, and as always, happy reading.